Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
And a very good morning to you, and a very good week to you indeed. This is Newsline broadcasting live from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And it's a fairly nice day out there, slightly damp, but nevertheless a nice day, and with promises of an even nicer day to come. Now then, in this world of complexities and runaway exchange rates and a spiraling economy, spiraling downwards, we must spare a moment, a thought for thousands of people who are caught in a debt trap, especially in the rural areas, or in what we call in the microfinance world. And to discuss this growing problem, a serious problem, and the fact that banks don't appear to be doing much about it, we've got a person who's a former central banker and who's been in financial regulation all her professional life, and yes, it's a her, and also a prolific writer on these matters, on financial regulation, and is almost a sort of activist when it comes to implementing financial regulation. And that person is none other than Joan Moonesinghe. Very good morning to you, Ms. Moonesinghe.
Good morning, Faraz.
It's nice to have you on the program, and thank you for being here. Thousands of people are trapped in this sort of growing debt trap thanks to high interest rates. Why is it? Why are there no regulations in place to regulate this?
It's very unfortunate that the microfinance regulation, which took so long to be enacted, even when I was at the central bank. I mean, it was, they had international expertise and there's several drafts, but it never came to light. Right. Then finally, they enacted it in 2016. But there's a huge lacuna in that it just regulates the licensing of microfinance institutions and defines microfinance, but it does not regulate the business of microfinance. And
that's a serious drawback.
Exactly.
Well, why is it? You were part of the central bank at one point.
Yeah, but I was not involved in the drafting of
True,
this.
but why? What is the role then of the regulator? Should it not be also not only issuing licenses, but an ongoing process, an accountability process?
Absolutely. I can't understand. In fact, the governors at that time were also not satisfied with the legislation that was enacted. They expressed their dissatisfaction and said, what is this? What can we do with this?
What's the point of giving a license and letting them play pandu?
That's right. That's precisely the point. Because they have a microfinance department, they have the RDD, the Regional Development Department, all which their objective is to alleviate poverty.
Right.
And the equal distribution of credit in the region.
How important is it to develop the small enterprise out there, out in the non-urban areas?
It is important, because now today, as you know, we are facing a huge crisis because we are such an import-dependent economy. Indeed. Because of the exchange rate.
Yes.
Right? If we had built these enterprises very long ago, successive governments had, with national initiative, built up the MSMEs, that is the micro, small and medium enterprises. They would have been the engines of growth. As you know, in Taiwan, Korea, most of these countries, they have been the engines of growth.
I have just come back from South Korea, and I couldn't help but be completely bowled over by how they've done this.
Exactly.
Many years ago, when President Park came into power, he realized that this couldn't do. South Korea then was a very poor nation, and they decided that they needed to do three things, and they were in no particular order: export, export, and export.
Exactly.
And that's what they did.
That's right.
I was speaking to a gentleman who's 93 years old, who's an advisor to that President Park, and he told me that they took the message of the benefits of export to the public.
Yeah.
They went into all these rural areas and encouraged everybody to think export, to produce items that would be export orientated.
Exactly.
And that's how they did it. Today, South Korea is the 11th largest economy in the world.
Of course.
And everywhere you go, it's all about the economy.
Yeah,
you can see thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of apartment blocks and so on. And they are doing jolly well, thank you very much. And Joan Moonesinghe, I know I don't want to drag you into politics, but last Friday we were treated to the information that a former president of South Korea was jailed for 15 years for his role in corruption, for having accepted a bribe from another party to release their chairman, who was the chairman of Samsung. And everybody knows Samsung. Yeah. And for his role in that, he was given 15 years. By the way, when he went inside, he would have been rather in comfortable company, because there are three other presidents of Korea who are in prison, making this chap the fourth such person. Now, I rest my case. I doubt if we're going to ever find. We've got no politicians inside anyway.
Exactly.
So now that back again to this. But Joan, we see the banks making rather good profits, phenomenal profits even. Yeah. Is there some sort of imbalance?
Yeah, I think there is, because I think the other day I was interviewed and I was told that the corporates, the profits have declined, but on the contrary, the banks, the profits are increasing. But that's all you hear. Because you look at the newspapers and all you see is the banks.
And they've now said that their loan repayment performance is falling rapidly.
You see?
Basically, people can't pay back their loans.
Exactly. So how does it relate to their increased profits? And because the loans are the income generating asset of the banks.
Right.
The largest income generating asset of the banks. So if they are not performing, then from where are they getting this income? They're obviously accounting for non-performing income, which they cannot do.
And some of these are, shall we say, inflated figures, because a number of these, especially some of the state banks, are not really, their non-performing loan book isn't really correct, because they do have institutions like Sri Lankan Airlines, for example.
They're so easy.
And the state-owned enterprises, their loans, they've never been paid back, the CPC, for example, and yet they're not reflected in the non-performing loans, thereby helping their books to look good and to look grand, and to go around the world and collect all sorts of awards in the region and so on and so forth. Remember, of course, that we also had a situation where a minister was, one of our ministers was given to be the best such minister in the whole of Asia, only to resign a few weeks later. Anyway, what is not being done, Joe?
No, with the state banks, I must say, all the SOEs, most of these loans that are non-performing are supported by government guarantees.
Indeed.
Right, so that's why they don't provision. Because, I mean, you can call on the government guarantee. So that becomes a contingent liability of the government, right? So I wouldn't say that they are not accounting for it.
Yeah.
That's because the central bank has to intervene in that case.
But, you know, the banks are making, shall we call it, unconstitutional profits. Isn't there some truth that the banks are lending to down the value chain, to say microfinanciers, and then of course those rates, those guys go and lend it completely unregulated, nothing. There are instances of 35% plus, 40% and so on.
It's much higher.
There are some instances when it's just the polymodulalis, of course, another kettle of fish altogether.
That's right.
And therefore, it'll be interesting to analyze deeply the profits of the banks to find out where their chunk is coming from.
That's precisely what I said, that the boards of management of the banks must intervene when these profits are presented to them and to take some interest and find out where these profits are coming from. And
not lie back on their laurels.
Exactly, exactly. Now, what happened in the NEWSLINE case in Singapore?
Indeed.
Right, the profits were coming from Singapore,
yeah.
and nobody bothered because they were so happy that the profits were coming in. And finally, when they found that this man was really covering up his losses,
yeah.
it was too late. The bank crashed.
In a way, the central bank is fast asleep, and therefore it's time that the Auditor General, who is not asleep, starts focusing on these banks and audit all of these banks who have made these huge, and let's call them unconstitutional profits.
Unconscionable profits.
It is unconscionable, and certainly that is the right word instead of unconstitutional, unconscionable. And after all, everyone has a conscience, and as was it Gandhi who said that the highest court is the court of conscience.
Conscience, exactly. And what I say is it boils down to responsible banking. After all, these institutions are licensed to accept public deposits. And it is these deposits that finance the assets that generate this income.
Yeah.
So what are the depositors getting? Right? Finally, they are all looking at shareholder value. How much do the shareholders contribute? Less than 10%, sometimes a little less than 15% perhaps.
Yeah.
Right? But it's all financed by the depositors' funds.
There is one company that I've been looking at. Their APR, their annual percentage is a staggering 365%. Yes, it's non-collateralized. That means there are no tangible assets to back it, but the interest rate is 365%. In Britain, we had Wonga, who went belly up.
Yes.
Because their interest rates, they are paycheck lenders. They lend against your salary for a few days. But if you look at their rate of interest, it is absolutely incredible. And when I contacted the central bank with the details of this, after some days, I got back a response saying that they don't regulate that company because they don't accept deposits. But that's one hell of a joke, Joan. You know what happened in the case of Golden Key and so on.
Exactly.
All these high rates of interest, and the central bank just didn't do anything about it.
No, they cannot, because in the interest of financial system stability, which is one of their key objectives, they are responsible for market conduct and the integrity of the market.
And that is precisely why the Financial Services Authority in Britain jumped in, and although that company was clearly not accepting deposits and therefore couldn't be regulated by them, in the interest of market conduct, that is why they stepped in and they forced Wonga to return monies and so on. But of course now Wonga's gone belly up. Are we going to wait for another Golden Key type of episode in this country? Because at the end of the day, finally, what has happened? The central bank has had to step in and help pay these monies. Yeah,
I know, because now the governor himself led a team to the north because it was so bad in the north, the debt trap that these people had got into post-war. Everyone rushed to the north to just give loans,
but recklessly. They're not doing it to earn money, John. They're using it for consumption. They're two different things.
Exactly. So they didn't look at that aspect. That's why I said that the central bank should have conducted thematic examination of the institutions that granted, especially the licensed institutions that granted this credit. And if they had indeed granted credit recklessly, then they should be held accountable and they should write off those loans.
Indeed.
They should write off those loans.
So here we have a system where the banks are lending to some people, and they then take it and lend it throughout the microfinance world without, you use the right word, recklessly, without regard to the rates of interest, because after all, it's all in the numbers.
And more than the rate of interest, their repayment capacity.
Indeed.
Their repayment
capacity. Without any consideration to their repayment capacity.
That's right.
I mean, when these salesmen go there and push these loans right down the chain, they have an obligation to check that this money, this
Yes.
10,000 or 20,000 or 100,000
Yes.
rupees is being spent on that purpose,
productive purpose,
on a productive purpose to help them
to generate some
income, not to pay their bill and so on and so forth.
Exactly. So this is what happened, and you know they were not worried because they were given targets.
Yeah.
They brought the targets back to the head office, and they were rewarded. And the high interest rates meant that in no time they were able to recover their principal.
When I visited Kilinochchi and the former conflict areas, not too long ago, maybe about 9 months ago, I was shocked because I was looking at the state of housing, and when we went into one particular, I can only describe it as a hut. It was made out of mud, and we had to sort of duck in and go inside. I was completely shocked because there was a huge television, there was a music system, and there was a laptop, and I wanted to know how, if there is so much of poverty, they're living in a hut, basically, and yes, I've got the photographs to prove this thing, right? When I did a bit of work, they said, oh, the chap from the local showroom has come there and lent them the money to buy it. Now, the minute they miss their repayment, all those goodies will be taken
confiscated.
away.
Exactly.
And that's not the end of the matter. They will then pursue them no end until they repay those monies.
Yes. Even still, these tactics are being used, and I think the central bank is also very, very, very concerned. And I think the Monetary Board and the governor are looking at it.
So what can be done?
Well, I think there has to be a national initiative to build up these microfinance institutions. You know, we have a lot of peripheral institutions, financial institutions, licensed institutions, like we have the Samurdhi Bank, you have the thrift and credit cooperative societies, you have the cooperative rural banks, you have the Divi Naguma banks. All these are, that's the platform to be used to launch these microfinance and SME initiatives. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There you use them.
You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yes. And you know, build up that infrastructure, because those institutions are so badly structured, no one even wants to go and work there. So you know, you have to build up their capabilities and encourage people to go into these institutions. If you go to the cooperative rural banks, they're just holes in the wall. I can't understand why anybody wants to go and work there. And then they're just mobilizing the deposits of the people, and they're not granting credit. If you look at the credit deposit ratio of these institutions, it's in the central bank statistics. They're very low. So they're just taking the deposits and not granting credit. And these people are at the mercy of the local money lenders. Exactly. And then even the RDD, the Regional Development Department of the Central Bank, has so many loan schemes. So many loan schemes.
So why are these guys asleep?
So they should, you know, give more money to these loan schemes and disseminate it through these institutions.
But yet we see this as of another bank who's received. The bank has received money, 400 or 500 million, but they're not even in microfinancing in that sector, and so they're obviously lending to the comfortable collateralized loan section.
People that are participating credit institutions in all these schemes, there are interest rate subsidies, credit guarantees, all are given by the central bank from the RDD. So these can be used to grow this sector.
What about this Enterprise Sri Lanka initiative?
That's a very good initiative. If there's a commitment to take it right to the other end of the spectrum.
But isn't implementation our key problem?
This is the problem, because we don't have committed people who are committed to implement this.
And where does that, in your opinion, where does that commitment, where should it start from?
Well, it has to start from the very top.
From the central bank?
Not from the central bank, from the institutions themselves, these institutions, which select these people. The criteria, I mean, you know, you can't select people on lists, political lists. You have to get committed people who have the capabilities, who have the skills to carry this message and implement these, they're very good schemes. They're very good schemes if they're implemented in the correct way. And unfortunately, the president had confined it to the state banks. I don't know why. It was only the state banks. He must involve all the banks in this, right? And if a directive comes from the president, they will all, and the state and the private sector banks have so much expertise.
And that would be good use of executive powers.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just don't know why it was confined to the two state banks only. So I think all the banks should be in this initiative.
As a prolific author on financial regulation, and you keep constantly going on about it, where would you like it, tomorrow morning, where would you like it, where these people to, where would you want it to restart?
Well, directives from the central bank, message from the governor. Governor appears at so many fora.
Yeah.
Today, he's one of the key speakers at most. Send the message across. Corporate governance is very important, right? And the message to the commercial banks that they should lend in a responsible manner. Not only talk about the increase in their profits, right? Are they conscionable?
Yeah.
What are the income generating units of their banks that are generating this profit? If it's not, are they productive? That is the most important thing, for productive purposes, to generate economic growth.
And as you know, we get messages sent in to us by SMS. And one such is, why is the government not reducing interest rates for long-term export industry and for agricultural surplus export to private enterprise?
Exactly, exactly. That's a very good question. And that's policy, right?
That comes as a result of a lack of policy.
Exactly. Do we have even have agricultural policy, right? To induce the growth of at least something in this country. We import everything. Look at the milk powder, right? I mean, for our children, now with this devaluation, look at the cost of milk powder. What is it going to be? We are the largest importers of dried milk powder in the world. Don't we have pasture? Can't we develop our local milk industry? Right?
But as one of these industrialists said at some forum, it's all fine at the time they're doing a project, but then the government of the day comes around and then shifts the goalpost there.
Exactly.
And you're aiming here, and so suddenly it's gone there.
It's not a sustainable. That's why, Faraz, I think, in most of these things, you must have national consensus. The government of the day must invite the other parties
and
as well.
How easy is it here? We've got a national government. So therefore, national consensus, I presume, is easy to obtain.
I know, it is easy to, but it should be obtained. And then when you have national consensus, then they cannot change it. Even if the government changes, they cannot change it.
Indeed.
You know, education, health, agriculture, imports, exports, those have to be a national consensus. They can't be for a particular government for a particular period. It's not sustainable.
But obviously, Joan, when we look at the fact that people are borrowing down the chain, you know, in the microfinance world, when they're borrowing and then actually using it for consumption, that is an indication of a serious problem with the economy, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, of course. Consumption, the whole problem is, I'm not sure whether the central bank even still collates data on household debt versus business.
Right.
I pointed it out when I was there, and this is one of the key indicators, the level of household debt versus business finance, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't think the central bank is still computing this data. That will show you how much is going into unproductive consumption, you know, and how much is being given to the business world, because that's where the economic growth is going to come from. Now look at the import policy on vehicles. Successive governments have not addressed this issue.
Successive governments haven't
address this issue. I mean, they keep on importing vehicles, so many vehicles, my God.
Is that a good thing now? They've imposed a 200% cash margin.
But it's too late, isn't it?
It's
too late.
Is it a bit after the horse is bolted?
Absolutely, absolutely. And look at what we are facing today, this huge crisis. I mean, I don't know. I mean the banks borrow in foreign currency. What is the cost of this?
Then I must ask you this question, because somebody is asking this. Who regulates microfinance?
The central bank.
Right. What about the NGOs then?
They are also part of this. I mean, that's why I said the lacuna in the Act. It licenses the NGOs that are doing microfinance, but it does not regulate the business. This is the whole problem with the Microfinance Act.
So anybody, it appears, can go and get some money lent to them, and then go and re-lend it down the line at huge rates, and there's no regulation.
I'm not sure that they even conduct on-site examinations, or have off-site data from these institutions. Now, even there is those institutions that have a capital of 100 million. I mean, how many of these microfinance institutions have 100 million as capital?
So the problem's serious.
It is. I think there has to be national initiative, a vibrant national, like most countries in the region, all countries in the region. You take NABARD in India. My gosh, what a lot of work they are doing.
But the central bank says constantly that they don't regulate some of these lenders because they don't accept deposits.
Yeah.
But the institutions themselves accept a deposit in the form of they go and get a loan.
That's right. That's right. And so that's something that they have to.
So that seems to be
monitor.
A slight small glitch there.
Glitch there. Absolutely. So those things, those gaps have to be closed. And especially the schemes given by the central bank from the RDD, you have to expand that system and encourage these people, the microfinance borrowers, to come to these schemes, at very, very, very concessionary rates of interest. It ranges from 2% to 12%.
On this program, we had the head of one bank who said that when I asked him what would be a fair rate in the current playing field, he suggested 22%.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I think that's a fair rate compared to what is being charged now. That's a fair rate.
Do you think all our bank chairmen and MDs and directors are having a collective heart attack right now because I've suggested 22%?
No, I don't think so, because
will they be able to make these phenomenal profits?
They won't be able to make such high profits, but at least they're conscionable profits.
And it'll be more equitable.
Equitable, absolutely. That's what is needed. At the end of the day,
that's what was promised, by the way,
yes,
Joan.
Yes.
They promised us an equitable lifestyle.
So that's what they have to ensure it is achieved, and not at the expense of the poor borrowers who have to pay these. You're killing them. No borrower who has to pay these excessive interest rates. If you have to get a loan and you have to pay this, can you afford it? This is what I'm asking.
Isn't the best solution for a complete audit to be done and catch just one company, one bank, and then everybody else would fall into line?
Yeah, I think so, and that can be done by by the central bank.
Yes.
By the central bank, I suggested that in my article that I wrote, that the central bank conducts a thematic examination of this sector, loans granted to this sector, and see where the problem lies and why are these people, and what were the repayment cycles? They collect it in 2 weeks. Some of these places then some institutions are getting concessionary lines of credit. Are these concessionary lines of credit used for this sector? They're dedicated to this sector, to microfinance, to SMEs. There is no evidence that these lines of credit are being used for these sectors, because they go into the general pool of funds of these institutions, and they cannot be identified. So then how do you dedicate them to this sector? Because they should get the benefit of the concessionary lines of credit, the borrower.
Joan, thank you so much for having come on Newsline. But we wish you very well, and that we hope that you continue plugging this case, because you need to constantly, rather like, dare I say, a la Bond style, because otherwise people will forget. And thank goodness that at least you're there, and of course we're here. Do come on here on our programs and explain the seriousness of the problem that is facing our country, because dollars are not suddenly going to end up in that reserve bank, is it?
Exactly. I have abiding interest in financial inclusion and in financial regulation. So I will continue my work. Now
and what we need is financial literacy, isn't it?
Exactly. That the governor himself has said that they're going to have a national financial inclusion strategy.
Indeed.
And I have suggested that, you know, it will be all-encompassing with digital financial literacy and all that. So
there are so many invitations to you, Joan, to join people in various discussions. They're saying, can you please have more time? We can't, because it's the end of the program. All right? So Joan Moonesinghe, former central banker and a prolific author on financial inclusion, regulation, and financial literacy. Thank you very much. And that's the way it was on Newsline today. Take care, have a great day ahead, and God bless.
Thank you.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.